For most of human history, money had a simple purpose. It was a mirror. It reflected something real: grain stored, land owned, labor performed, gold mined, goods exchanged. Money did not create value, it measured it. If the harvest failed, money became scarce. If trade flourished, money circulated. The system breathed with reality. But at some point, that relationship broke. Money stopped reflecting the world and began reshaping it. There was no announcement, no single decision, no dramatic collapse, just a gradual shift, so subtle that generations lived through it without noticing what had changed. What once represented reality slowly detached from it, until money no longer described what existed, but dictated what could exist. To understand when that happened, we need to return to a time when money still had weight. For centuries, money was constrained. Coins were made of precious metals. Paper notes were promises, claims on something tangible held elsewhere. If you held money, it meant someone, somewhere, owed you something real. And because of that, limits existed. You could not create money without first creating value. That limitation mattered. It forced discipline. Governments could not spend endlessly. Banks could not lend infinitely. When mistakes were made, consequences followed. Inflation was visible. Shortages were felt. The system corrected itself through pain, but it corrected. Then came the pressure to grow. As economies expanded and populations increased, money became inconvenient. Gold was heavy. Supply was slow. Wars needed financing faster than metals could be mined. Infrastructure demanded scale. Governments wanted flexibility. Banks wanted reach. So money evolved. Paper replaced metal. Promises replaced possession. Trust replaced constraint. At first, this worked. As long as paper could be redeemed for something real, the connection held. But the temptation was always there, to issue just a little more paper than the gold allowed. To solve today's problem and deal with tomorrow later. And slowly, later became permanent. The true break didn't happen when money became paper. It happened when money stopped being a claim on reality and became a claim on confidence. When value was no longer anchored to what existed, but to what people believed would continue. The decisive moment came in the 20th century. After 2 world wars, nations were exhausted. Gold was scarce. Economies were fragile. Stability mattered more than discipline. So a new arrangement was created, one where money was backed not by metal, but by governments themselves. And governments, in turn, were backed by the promise of future productivity. It sounded reasonable. As long as economies grew, debts could be paid. As long as trust remained, money would hold value. Growth became the assumption. Confidence became the currency. Then, in 1971, the final tether was cut. When the United States ended the convertibility of the dollar into gold, money officially stopped representing anything tangible. From that moment on, currency was backed by nothing but belief. Belief that governments would manage responsibly, that economies would expand indefinitely, and that future obligations would always be honored. Money became abstract. Numbers replaced limits. Screens replaced vaults. Creation replaced conservation. And something profound changed. When money no longer represents reality, it no longer has to obey it. Scarcity becomes optional. Risk becomes transferable. Consequences become deferred. If something breaks, it doesn't have to fail. It can be rescued, refinanced, restructured. Money stopped being a measurement tool. It became a control system. Assets began to rise in price not because they produced more, but because more money existed to chase them. Labor stagnated while capital expanded. Productivity decoupled from compensation. Wealth accumulated not through creation, but through proximity to money creation itself. This is when finance overtook the real economy. Markets no longer responded to goods and services, but to signals, interest rates, policy statements, liquidity injections. A sentence from a central banker could move trillions. Reality became secondary to expectation, and expectations could be managed. Entire industries emerged to trade abstractions, derivatives, futures, options, instruments built on assumptions. Money began circulating inside itself, generating profit without touching the real world. This wasn't corruption. It was evolution. A system designed to stabilize itself must detach from the constraints of reality. Reality is unpredictable. It has limits. It resists control. Abstraction does not. Once money became abstract, governments gained a powerful tool. They could spend without immediate consequence. Debt could grow without visible collapse. Pain could be delayed, spread, disguised. But every delay has a cost. Inflation became normalized. Asset bubbles became cyclical. Crashes became corrections. Each intervention prevented collapse, but increased dependence. The system grew larger, more complex, more insulated from accountability. And ordinary people felt something was wrong, even if they couldn't name it. They worked more, yet felt poorer. They saved, yet fell behind. They followed the rules, yet watched others win without producing anything tangible. It felt unreal, because it was. Money was no longer describing effort, skill, or contribution. It was responding to access, leverage, timing, and information. Reality became optional for those closest to the system. And still, the system continued. Because once money stops representing reality, returning to reality becomes dangerous. If money were suddenly constrained again, debts would collapse, markets would deflate, expectations would shatter. The correction would be too severe. So the abstraction must be maintained. More liquidity, more intervention, more distance from the real economy. The irony is that money was created to simplify exchange, to make reality easier to navigate. Now, reality must bend to accommodate money. Governments shape policy around markets. Lives are organized around financial indicators. Growth is pursued even when it no longer improves life. The symbol replaced the substance. And this is the quiet truth. The day money stopped representing reality wasn't a mistake. It was a trade. Stability in exchange for truth. Continuity in exchange for limits. Control in exchange for meaning. The system didn't break. It adapted. But when symbols drift too far from what they represent, trust erodes. Not suddenly, but slowly. People stop believing narratives. Institutions feel hollow. Value feels arbitrary. And that's where we are now. Living inside a system where money still works, but no longer makes sense. Where numbers grow while foundations weaken. Where value exists, but meaning is harder to find. Understanding this isn't about rejecting money or fearing collapse. It's about seeing clearly. About recognizing that money is no longer a mirror of reality, but a language of power, confidence, and control. And once you see that shift, you stop asking why life feels disconnected. You realize the disconnect was designed. That was the day money stopped representing reality, and the day reality began adapting to money.